In this lesson, you're going to learn English with the news. We're going to read a news article together so you can learn advanced vocabulary, advanced grammar, and correct pronunciation. Welcome back to JForrest English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started. Our headline, Elbows Up, How Canadians Are Fighting Back Against Trump's Tariffs. Do you know what this means here, elbows up? Well, of course, this is your elbow. So there's an expression, if your elbows are up, it means you're in a position to prepare for a fight. We use this also more metaphorically if you're going into a meeting and you expect that meeting will be tense or have some arguments. You might say to your coworker, elbows up when you're renegotiating your contract, for example. So it's saying prepare for a fight or prepare to be defensive or defend yourself. And you can see that context here because they use the word fighting back. Now notice you have this additional preposition because you fight back against something or someone. So the article headline could say Trudeau on the left here, Canada's Prime Minister. Trudeau is fighting back against Trump because that's a someone. But in this case, it's a something, Trump's tariffs. So the focus is on the tariffs. And of course, to fight back against someone or something means to resist, to oppose, or to defend. Now, you can also just use the verb fight and say Canada or Canadians or Trudeau is fighting and then something or someone. So in this case, you could say the tariffs imposed by the US. So it is possible just to use the verb fight. Don't worry about taking these notes. I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. Now let's continue with the article. Replacing Californian tomatoes with Italian tomatoes. Ohio-made pepperoni with meats produced in Ontario and Quebec. Ontario is where I'm from. Coca-Cola with sparkling water sweetened with Canadian maple syrup. Do you notice anything about these sentences in this paragraph? So this is a paragraph and then this is a sentence. But what do you notice about every sentence in this paragraph? They're incomplete sentences, which means they're grammatically incorrect, technically. However, they are written this way because they're providing examples of how Canada is fighting back. So if you read the headline and then you immediately read this part, you understand the full sentence, even though this alone is grammatically incorrect. To turn this fragment into a full sentence, you could add, for example, Canadians are fighting back by. Now, this preposition by requires the gerund verb. So that grammatically matches this gerund here, by replacing California tomatoes with Italian tomatoes, and then instead of a period, you could have a semicolon to keep going, and then it would be grammatically correct. Now, notice also how I have against the tariffs in parentheses. You can just use fight back without the additional preposition against if you do not specify the someone or something. So if you just say Canadians are fighting back by replacing Californian tomatoes with Italian tomatoes, that's correct. But as soon as you add the tariffs, now this is grammatically incorrect. Fighting back the tariffs? No. Fighting back against the tariffs because you included the something, or you could include the someone. To practice this sentence structure, you could say something poetic or something that inspires confidence, like I'm fighting back against, now you have a something, my fear of speaking, and how are you doing it? By, and now you need your gerund, by improving my English fluency with Jennifer. Does that statement inspire you and motivate you? Get your elbows up against your fear? Well, if it does, put yes, 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 put yes, yes, yes. Fight back against that fear. I'm here to help you. Put yes, yes, yes in the comments. Let's keep going. At the end of January, US President Donald Trump ramped up threats to annex Canada. Did you hear about this? To annex Canada? That's where the president proposed that Canada would become a state rather than its own distinct country. So that's what it means by annex Canada, and wreck its economy with tariffs. What do you notice about the pronunciation of this word? Wreck. Wreck. So that W is silent, just like right, to write, but you're right. So the same thing, that WR, you just hear the R. Wreck, wreck. And the verb wreck, to wreck, means to severely damage or destroy. You could say my car was wrecked, to be wrecked. My car was wrecked in the crash. Your car is extremely damaged, is destroyed, is not usable, it's beyond repair, was wrecked. We also use this to describe things as in a state of ruin or disaster. For example, a parent could walk into their teenager's room, their child's room, and say, your room is a wreck. So this describes it as a state of ruin. So you can imagine it's extremely messy. Or you could even say the project is a wreck to say it's not going very well, it's a disaster, a state of ruin. But notice the important difference here, because I have a wreck. So it's being used as a noun, a disaster, a state of ruin. The project is a wreck. But you could also say you wrecked the project. So this is saying you destroyed the project. So maybe you made a mistake, a critical mistake, and it ruined the project. You wrecked the project. So in this case, it's a verb. You conjugate the verb, in this case, the past simple, but here notice it's a noun. Now let's look at ramped up. Notice that pronunciation, ramped. Because P is a voiced sound, this ED is pronounced as a soft T. Ramped, ramped, ramped up, ramped up. And then when you say it with the preposition up, you're not going to hear that T too much because we don't want to create a pause. So repeat after me, ramped up, ramped up. So to ramp up something, in this case, threats, means to increase the intensity or volume of. Thinking about your English, you could say, I need to ramp up, increase the intensity, amount, or speed. I need to ramp up my studying if I want to pass the IELTS. Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson. An unfamiliar emotion has been brewing in normally polite Canada. Anger. Now maybe you're not familiar with this expression, but can you understand the meaning based on context? And that's a great thing to do when you're not sure of what something means. Try to guess. Try to guess what a replacement verb or replacement, whatever the part of speech is, depending on the context. So has been brewing. An unfamiliar emotion has been building up, has been increasing in normally polite Canada. Anger. So this emotion is normally not in Canada, is what this article is saying, and it's been brewing. So notice this use of the present perfect continuous to say that the action started in the past and continues until now. So you can imagine this emotion, anger. It's been building, 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 increasing, 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 has been brewing. You can use this with a positive emotion, excitement. Excitement has been brewing. So has been increasing, developing, or building up, has been brewing. So again, the present perfect continuous to show it started in the past and continues until now. And then you could go on and say as the party, vacation, or concert, something that would produce the emotion of excitement as the party approaches. So this is the reason why excitement has been brewing. Let's continue. Since Trump first threatened to enact sweeping tariffs on Canadian imports and began referring to the US's northern neighbor as the 51st state. So this is the reference to annexing Canada, where Canada would become part of the US, the 51st state. Now notice here, we have this apostrophe to show possession. But when I verbally say it, the US's, because I have to add that additional S to show the possession. If I just say the US, northern neighbor, it sounds incorrect because you need to hear that US's, that is, to show the possession. So it sounds like a very unstressed is, US's northern neighbor as the 51st state. Now let's look at this sweeping tariffs. If something is described as sweeping, it means it would cover everything. So it sounds like the tariffs would be on all Canadian products. So sweeping tariffs. Let's review this example. The school is proposing, so suggesting, is proposing sweeping changes. So that sounds like wide-ranging or far-reaching or large in scope, sweeping changes to how students are evaluated. So let's continue here. Animosity toward the US. Do you know what animosity is? It's a very negative emotion. It means hostility, resentment, or ill will, which just simply means negativity. You could say animosity has been brewing as well, using that other expression we learned. Animosity toward the US and its leader, so being Trump, has been mounting. Okay, so you could say here has been brewing because mounting is the exact same thing. Now, often in articles, they don't want to repeat the same word again. This is why it's important to learn synonyms because it will sound more advanced in speaking and writing. So has been brewing, has been mounting, and you also have has been developing or has been building up. So you now know 4 different ways to communicate this. Let's continue. Canadians have canceled vacations south of the border and loudly booed the Star-Spangled Banner, the national anthem of the United States, at sports events. So do you know what this means, loudly booed? This is when you say boo, boo. So you show your animosity towards something vocally by saying boo, boo. So they're actually using this as a verb, to boo something, which means to show your lack of satisfaction toward something. Let's continue. After months of warnings, Trump on Tuesday slapped 25% tariffs on nearly all Canadian goods. The verb to slap is to do that. In this context, slapping something on means to enforce it, but just like a slap is very fast and forceful, that's the meaning as well. So to enforce tariffs, and they did it quickly and forcefully. So Trump on Tuesday slapped, again, because we have this P, this pronunciation of ED is a soft T, slapped 25% tariffs on nearly all Canadian goods, sending markets plummeting. So plummeting is quickly declining or going down. So sending markets plummeting and driving Canada-US relations to a new low. Almost immediately, Canadian leader Trudeau responded with matching tariffs on $20.8 billion. So notice when you say this, $20.8 billion with an S, billion dollars worth of American goods, with potentially more to come. Just remember that S goes on dollars and not on billion dollars. Let's continue. Canadians are reasonable and we are polite, but we will not back down from a fight. So this is the reference of elbows up, because if you back down, it means you retreat. So you do not respond. So your elbows would not go up. But if you do not back down from a fight, it means you respond. So that reference to elbows up in a defensive position. And of course, that is figuratively. They're not actually talking about fighting each other physically. Now notice here you also have that additional preposition from if you specify the noun, in this case, a fight. But just like we saw with fight back, if you don't specify the noun, the someone or something, you don't need that additional preposition. So you could say, we will not back down. We will fight back. So if you specify the noun, it will be, we will not back down from a fight. We will fight back. What was the preposition here? If it were tariffs, what's that preposition? Fight back against tariffs. Now, I wrote a, but there is no a because tariffs is plural and you do not use a with a plural. So against tariffs. So this would be optional. You would only use against if you included the noun tariffs. And here you could say from a fight. We will fight back against tariffs. So let's continue. But we will not back down from a fight, not when our country and the well-being of everyone in it is at stake, Trudeau said Tuesday. So notice this, at stake. So here he said our country and the well-being of everyone in it is at stake. This at stake means at risk. So at risk of being lost. The country is at risk of being lost if the US is serious about wanting to annex Canada. And the well-being of everyone is at risk of being lost if these high tariffs are slapped onto Canada. You might say, my job is at stake if I don't improve my communication skills. So here, to be at stake. So my job is at risk of being lost. So it's another way of saying I could lose my job if I don't improve my communication skills. Don't worry. That's why I'm here to help. Trump said he told Trudeau on a Wednesday telephone call. Okay, so if it were just on Wednesday, like I first read it, then you would not use you could just say on Wednesday. But here, Wednesday tells you information about the telephone call. So it functions as an adjective. So on a telephone call, on a Wednesday telephone call. So you could say, my boss told me the news on Monday. So on plus day of the week, on Monday. Or you could say, my boss told me the news on a call. Now, what type of a call? A conference call, a Zoom call, a telephone call, a Monday call. So this gives information about the call.
So Trump said he told Trudeau on a Wednesday telephone call that the Canadian leader, Trudeau, hadn't done enough to curb fentanyl crossing the border. So fentanyl is a drug. And to curb means to prevent the drug from crossing the border, to stop the drug from crossing the border. So this is a verb, to curb something. And you curb something negative. For example, how can we curb cheating? So notice if you have a verb, it will be in the ing form. It functions as the gerund. How can we curb cheating now that everyone has access to ChatGPT? Or you might want to curb your spending on unnecessary things. So again, it's always something that you view as negative. So Trump feels that Trudeau hadn't done enough to curb fentanyl crossing the border, so going from Canada into the US, despite the minuscule amount that arrives in the US from its northern neighbor. So here, the minuscule amount means that only a very small amount of this drug travels from Canada to the US. A very small, minuscule. Minuscule is a powerful word because it doesn't just mean extremely small. It also implies that it's insignificant. So the amount is so small, it's not important. It's insignificant. So you could say, I tried to curb my spending. So limit, reduce, or stop my spending. But remember, you view this as a negative thing. So you're spending on things that you view are unnecessary. I tried to curb my spending, but the results were minuscule. So the results were so small, they were insignificant on the total amount of money you spend. Let's continue. Later in the week, the US president announced brief reprieves from the tariffs for automakers. A reprieve is a stop or a delay. Now, because they said a brief reprieve, it's a delay. A permanent reprieve could mean a stop. And it's a stop or delay, but this word is only used with something negative, such as a punishment or just any other negative action. So brief reprieves from the tariffs for automakers and for goods that fall under. So if something falls under a category, it means it's included in that category. That falls under, and in this case, the category is the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, which was formerly called NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, but now is called the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. So goods that fall under are included in this agreement. The phrasal verb to fall under is very commonly used with policies or departments, anything that has classification or categories. For example, all future exams fall under our new policy to curb cheating. So there's this new policy and there are provisions to prevent, stop, limit cheating, and all future exams are subject to. So fall under, are included in. But the current exams or past exams do not fall under. So they're not subject to, they're not included in. Let's continue. But for many, the 2 months of back and forth with Trump on tariffs have irreparably damaged ties. So notice how I pronounce this. Back and forth, back and forth. When you have this and, you can just pronounce it as a back and forth. But you must pronounce it as one word in order for that to sound correct. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And if you go back and forth, it means 1 minute you say yes tariffs, the next day no tariffs, 25%, 10%, all products, some products. So you're constantly changing your mind, which can, of course, cause confusion and even cause tension to brew. Now, you can use this in any situation. We went back and forth on where to go on vacation. So you changed your mind. 1 minute it's France, Italy, and then you're constantly changing your mind of where to go. So you can go back and forth on something. Let's review this example. The directors went back and forth. So the verb is to go, and this is conjugated in the past simple, to go back and forth on how to curb cheating. So they had frequent discussions, debates, and changes in decisions. Now notice here, the 2 months of back and forth. This functions as a noun, which is why you don't see the verb go. You could say, but for many, Trump going back and forth for 2 months. So you could say it in another way to use the verb form, because if you use the verb, you need to use go. But in this case, it's a noun. The 2 months of something, of back and forth with Trump on tariffs have irreparably damaged ties. Irreparably is a strong adverb. It means that it cannot be fixed. And in this case, the it is the ties, so the relationship between Canada and the US cannot be fixed, repaired, or undone. That's the meaning of irreparably damaged ties. And that's the end of the article. So what I'll do now is I'll read the article from start to finish, and this time you can focus on my pronunciation. Elbows up, how Canadians are fighting back against Trump's tariffs. Replacing Californian tomatoes with Italian tomatoes. Ohio made pepperoni with meats produced in Ontario and Quebec. Coca-Cola with sparkling water sweetened with Canadian maple syrup. At the end of January, U.S. President Donald Trump ramped up threats to annex Canada and wreck its economy with tariffs. An unfamiliar emotion has been brewing in normally polite Canada: anger. Since Trump first threatened to enact sweeping tariffs on Canadian imports and began referring to the U.S.'s northern neighbor as the 51st state, animosity toward the U.S. and its leader has been mounting. Canadians have canceled vacations south of the border and loudly booed the Star-Spangled Banner at sports events. After months of warnings, Trump on Tuesday slapped 25% tariffs on nearly all Canadian goods, sending markets plummeting and driving Canada-US relations to a new low. Almost immediately, Canadian leader Trudeau responded with matching tariffs on $20.8 billion worth of American goods, with potentially more to come. Canadians are reasonable and we are polite, but we will not back down from a fight, not when our country and the well-being of everyone in it is at stake, Trudeau said Tuesday. Trump said he told Trudeau on a Wednesday telephone call that the Canadian leader hadn't done enough to curb fentanyl crossing the border, despite the minuscule amount that arrives in the U.S. from its northern neighbor. Later in the week, the U.S. president announced brief reprieves from the tariffs for automakers and for goods that fall under the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement. But for many, the 2 months of back and forth with Trump on tariffs have irreparably damaged ties.
Do you want to keep learning English with the news? If you do, put yes, 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 put yes, yes, yes in the comments below. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And here's another lesson I know you'll love. Watch it now.